Okay. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's episode. Okay. Hello, everyone. The title of tonight's episode is Values of the Lives We Live. And so, Mr. Within wants to bring the attention of the human species to its design, to the nature of how its design has unraveled as part of the unknown movements of the phenomena became known bit by bit. We as creatures started off alone. I find there were millions and millions of years of solo evolution occurring until there was enough of a recognition and realization of the self. That means we were creatures that I find were the unconscious movement of matter. We became conscious due to the design, due to the way phenomena was designing on it. It was being designed on Earth, and my mind has wondered about, has in some sense dabbled in many origin theories and stories. But my peculiar interest has gone to the fact that I think it's the pattern of the light that is constantly hitting this creature. That means one thing we can say was for certain, regardless of how the surface of the earth looked, was that there was a sort of orbit going on. The fact that the surface of the planet was getting a tan, cyclically, as if one part of it, just the incredible geometrical engineering of planetary orbits, as if a sphere is spinning and there's a bigger sphere giving light, and this sphere, by the laws of nature, it's as if we are in a circular machine, cosmic machine, you know. And so this constant on and off switch of the light hitting the surface of the earth started off a pattern of visibility and invisibility, existence and non-existence. So what we perhaps do not see underneath the winds of evolution, I feel there was a shift. There was a moment of attention, and this moment of attention rebelled against itself, believe it or not, to collectively create itself. I have noticed there are energies on this planet that some are born with the intention of destruction and some are born with the intention of construction. And this is not me giving into the sense that, you see, what I find is that religion, or let me say it like this, religious societies and communities and religious ideology and secular ideology, they have one thing in common: the theist and the atheist. What they have in common is the fact that at some point in their ideology's evolution, there was a conclusion of nothingness. You see, this is a very uncommon way of thinking about it, but nothingness and emptiness has already met its destiny. That means only certain energetic phenomena of value tends to seek its purpose. When there's been times that I've kind of made myself introspectively, kind of contemplatively laugh, and let me tell you, I have had moments where my body has been horrified, but my mind has laughed. And let me tell you what I mean by that. I mean, there comes a moment where all that you have considered to be external reality will not seem like the cause of intelligence, will seem like the effect of intelligence. Now, I noticed something very interesting, that many human beings in history have, in some sense, been born with unique eyes, but unfortunately, very few of them could contribute to pointing to an ultimate error in the design of our sight. So what I mean by that is that the end of the objective reality is the subjective realm. And the end of the subjective realm is the objective realm. And only with the observance of both, only when the bird can move both of its wings, with a sort of symmetrical alignment, does it see truth. So what that means is the chaotic self within you and the order itself within you, they must stop their Gladiator Arena War. Have you noticed that if there was no earth, there would only be the heavens? But when there is earth, there is still the heavens. The heavens remains. The macrocosmic intentions of this universal sector surpass any ideology that can become even fathomable by man's mind. We must realize our position, and that is the gift of consciousness. The only reason there is self-awareness is because there requires to be an awareness to the self. I feel 2019 is a very interesting time to be alive, simply because we are at the pre-machining age. And what I mean by the pre-machining age is that there is a transformation from intuitive systems of natural trust to unnatural conscious plans. You see, the issue with consciousness is that who is telling the story? Because if there are moments where you can exist on this planet as a body that is howling a brain around that sometimes shows you a mind, or in some sense you are a mind projecting a body. Do you see how the responsibility shifts? When you think your physical matter and phenomena, your origin storyline becomes an effect of reality. But when you feel you're the mind, you become the cause of reality. So in one level, truth is already designed, we just have to see it. But in another level, truth is something that the way our attention moves, our sight generates such a value. So that is the task of the pretty much ultimate destination of evolution. That means they ask matter, what are you, hey material universe, what are you evolving to? And so matter shouted back, I am evolving into a thought. And after the subjective self came about, it's as if then humanity asked, hey subjective self, where are you evolving to? And the answer was silence. That's my point. We are moving towards what is inconceivable to our past technologies, which includes the language we use to generate and extract meaning from the world. So, in some sense, Mr. Within is saying one of the most intense statements, that in some sense, the language of your world is hollow because it gets updated by every experience, suggesting it's never fixed. That means, think about it. Imagine you're a person who you decide to only live through and inhabit a certain set of ideology in this life. You know, it doesn't matter whether it's religious oriented or not. There's many human moments, excuse me, there's many moments on this planet where human beings I don't know how to say it. There's a mask on the face of nature, which is us. And this mask is wondering about its purpose only to see behind the mask is nature, in front of the mask is technology. Nature nature takes us towards contentment. Nature takes us towards acceptance. Because I will tell you, you know what the hardest thing on this planet to do? It is not trying to get liberated or try to fly beyond the limits of your existence. The hardest thing in this world to do, Mr. Within finds, as a human being, is to observantly accept change before you define it. That means there have been moments where I have seen something so tragic, guys. It's like certain sad moments in civilization. You just walk out on the street and you will eventually see a sad moment. And when I remember seeing certain sad, chaotic moments during the early times where I was getting acquainted to the downtown area setting of Toronto. And I would see streets that were filled with not just hierarchies of statuses of wealth, but various abilities to apply a psychological perspective. That means in a world where everybody is suffering, people don't have time to pay attention to civilization and humanity. Those who suffer will seek only their enlightenment. Those who see the suffering of their civilization will enlighten their world. That is it. You're either looking through the eyes of a Buddha or you're looking through the eyes of a Bodhisattva. The Buddha was the one going from the bottom of the mountain to the top. All right, let's get enlightened and get out of this kind of, edge of hell world. But the Bodhisattva had a different approach. The Buddha wanted to enlighten himself. The Bodhisattva realized his self could not be enlightened until the world was. And that is the crucial factor. The realization that your intelligence is not separate. You will live as an individual creature. It doesn't matter who you are, what you are, whether you are staring through the silence or in some sense moving through the noise. It doesn't matter how intelligence has dared extend itself as you. It is the full recognition of the call of nature, and certain creatures develop certain ears because certain voices must be heard. It's as if our eyes exist to see the light of the stars, and therefore our consciousness exists to, in some sense, be present among some experiences. I felt that this life was a personal permission. But what you is personally real to you is a tiny percentage of where the social matrix is leading to. It becomes more complex the more movement it becomes. This is realistic. It's like many generals did not seek war. War came to their nation. War came to their kingdom. And this is the strange thing, that it's like the people fighting wars sometimes are the most honorable, honest, good people. but they are caught in a wrong action. They are caught in the manifestation of the ego of man. The worst and inefficient manifestation of the human ego is war. It is literally one person being, no, the way I see reality is this is the kingdom of truth. And another person says, no, the way I see reality is the kingdom of truth. And they charge at another as if they were blind men fighting from each in their universe of their own. It's as if they never saw each other. A war of the blind is just a war that never needed to happen. That is the issue. We are not intelligent enough to decide on discrimination. You cannot discriminate someone because when do you stop judging who they are? Let's say I see you right now as a person, and imagine somebody comes and tells me, yo, man, like you're a bad person or you're a good person. Imagine somebody comes and tells me. Okay, so my impression would be like, okay, I could believe this person who's just told me you're a bad person, for example, so I can entertain that reality, or I could think you're the opposite, or I could simply stand in the void. This standing in the void was where the liberative practice and the single pointedness of the mind of the Zen practitioner attained an acknowledgement of enlightenment. Believe it or not, you cannot cross the veil of thought and the language threshold until you can see yourself before embodiment. This is simply true. And let me tell you why. Because the higher dimensions of man are not moved by man. It's not, our language will never be able to fathom it. Language is a box that only can hold so much. Beyond, in the dimensions higher, it is very fascinating because right now we have a relationship that we are this small thing and this big thing. So we think our consciousness is small and the unconscious is big. The unknown aspects of the world is too big to see. Okay, so I'm saying in the higher dimensional kind of efforts of man's internal self-inquiry, he arrives into a state which, believe it or not, has nothing to do with external reality. It's like you climb that part of the mountain of philosophy where René Descartes spoke about the dualism of the mind and body, right? The person who thinks he's spiritual, it's so easy for that person to see a mind, right? Because you believe in a much more unknown thing than the mind. You believe you're a soul. You believe you are a continuity beyond matter. And that is not just a bold claim. It is a transitional thing in history. Pretty much creatures are popping out of nowhere into manifestation, and they decide if what they see is empty or full. And that is it. That is it. Every human being's ideology, system of thinking fundamentally comes down to how full is the world, how empty is it, what is absent, what is not. The moment you find value, that value you put in a spectrum. And then you become a creature of thought, bound to the realms of how language entered your ear. You know, I have a cousin who, in some sense, he got his master's in philosophy. I don't know if it was his master's or PhD. And I remember he was a very articulate person. But I remember when he came to the gathering, of course he was 10 years older than me, this cousin of mine, his name's Vijak. And when he came to the gathering, I felt he was this storehouse of having been someone whose eyes had met various ideological landscapes. But in that moment, my grandfather was in the room, and it didn't matter if my cousin had a PhD degree or not. He wanted to get the blessing of my grandfather. He wanted my grandfather's kind of respect to him. He wanted to seem successful in the eyes of the family that he was raised in, right? So what I'm trying to say is that in that moment, it didn't matter the certificate, the degree, the education. It mattered what was the experiential inspiration. What was that phenomena that became the muse of a moment? We human beings are creatures that when we fall in love with another human being, that is in some sense an action of embracing a design similar to yourself. Do you see? That means our civilization has not still evolved in literature to reach the point of having galactic love stories, right? The love stories that will begin with a man and, for example, you know, an extraterrestrial woman or something, you know. So I'm saying it's like we've had them in a comedic sense be shown in certain science fiction shows, but I'm saying the true love stories, as if it was in ancient times, it would be not just a love between two creatures in the same world, it would be a love between two creatures from two different worlds. The most important thing in life is not per se knowing what to do. It is just acknowledging how you're being in the moment. And I don't know how to tell you this, but karma is only around when you have been dishonest. Because the karma, playfully, you can say they are the lords of karma. These are rhythm, the laws of nature. Anytime you don't listen to them, the lords of karma appear. The wrath of the lords of karma appear. You know, it's like when you walk an escalator in the wrong way, the wrath of, you know, karma appears. It is about rediscovering the mystery that really gave the energy for your future as a child. So I remember in my childhood the moments that are most memorable, when I it's very fascinating. I have this relationship with my memory. The ideas that I have are like the greatest warriors on the battlefield of all the thoughts I've ever had who've made it, who've achieved, who it's as if I remember what I honor. It doesn't matter who you are, what you do. It's just the intention of the energetic expression that is manifest. We want to understand the behavior of the universe by understanding the behavior of ourselves and coming to the conclusion, oh my God, we sparked fire. We sparked identification and language. So deep down, dear listener, Mr. Within finds that you and every human being is an attributeless presence of attention so instantaneous that before you learned language, you were being it. So believe it or not, we are all obsessing over what should we do in our lives, not realizing whatever we do will continue to be. You see? So this is why at first you try to save the world, then the world tries to save you, then you realize you are the world. And then there comes the contentment for the mind to whirl into its collective states of being. And that's a majestic moment, you know, if you're a human being who experience a sort of moment where thoughts cannot enter that room, I will tell you, I have already saluted you in my sleep. Because it's an era of ideal worship. I'm telling you, it's like people only speak to you if they feel there is some value there. This is the state of the world. It has become a reward system kind of oriented phenomena. So the values of the lives we live is in how the attention from the moment of existence to its end maneuvers and navigates the experience. And so we tend to think that we are a thought, and like who's here is this kind of biological body that has a name and is part of the story, but how all of that is present is being the whole moment. So I'm telling you, your attention is not limited to your body. It is limited to the edge of your awareness, which is unknown. There's this incredible story by Confucius. And Confucius and his disciples were walking one day, and they see this kind of like small waterfall, and they see there's this old man with a basket, basket kind of on his back or something, walking, and the old man trips into the waterfall. It's a strange sight. And Confucius and his disciples are watching this. And Confucius, of course, if you don't know who he is one of the greatest contributions to the realms of philosophy. And he's a disciple of Lao Tzu, and he's a Chinese philosopher from, I don't know, what is it, 1,000 years ago or something. Fear not, dear being, you are not alone. The cosmos has one site, and we are all part of it. It's as if energy was never divided, energy never had borders, atoms could not become citizens of countries. The world began becoming animated in our minds, and that is the power and the story that Mr. Within finds the true story of humanity. That at some point we could no longer just wield weapons, we could wield objective reality as concepts in our mind. And so the attention of the child opened up to a new realm. And Mr. Within finds the solution to ideal worship is advanced communication. And this is why I consider any person I meet, you're either an advanced communicator or you're a pilot of consciousness. You're one of these. These are two kinds of personalities, which means you, when you come and speak to me, which side of your brain hemisphere you're more inclined towards. I'm a person who, how can I tell you, it's like I've gone through different phases. When I was younger, I saw the strength of discipline. When I got older, I saw the freedom of the creative, the freedom of space. And so Confucius and his disciples see this guy fall, and here's the point I'm trying to make. They see this old man fall, and this old man falls into the river, but suddenly he's safe at the bottom of the river. He comes out of the river, out of this waterfall, and it's as if nothing happened to him. And Confucius stares at us, and his disciples are kind of shocked and baffled. And so Confucius suddenly smiles, and his disciples like, yo, Confucius figured it out. Sherlock Holmes over here figured it out, And so Confucius walks up to this old man and says, hello, kind sir. At first I thought you were a human, but now I see that you are a spirit, because no human could survive that fall. As if Confucius is politely in his mind speaking to a spirit. And the old man looks at Confucius and he's like, no man, I'm not a spirit. I'm alive, bro. And Confucius gets shocked and he's like, what do you mean? What are you saying? And the old man looks at him and says, I'm a human being. It's just that I was in a certain state of mind that when I fell in the waterfall, I became the waterfall. When I stepped out of the waterfall, I became who I was before I fell in the waterfall. Do you see? It's as if you maintain your humanity, yet your awareness of it surpasses the limitations of how you use that humanity. Objective reality is kind of like the blank canvas, and we're constantly painting it with subjectivity. Because what else is ownership? Well, how else can you explain a child holding a teddy bear and thinking the teddy bear is its best friend? What it is it's an imposition of what a conceptual reality. What it is the mind is behaving in different ways, therefore giving off at first an illusion that there are endless parallel realities to the self, but then comes this, I don't know what it is, but it's like the importance of the moment. I don't know, strangely I feel I should explain it like this. So what I mean by the importance of the moment, that means, think of it this way, that every moment of life, whatever the situation is like a puzzle piece, is waiting for a missing puzzle piece. You can find a genius vision in anything. Let me tell you why. Because it's the law of nature. In simplicity, from simplicity comes from complexity. And complexity's ultimate evolution is a return to that simplicity. We are the children of the planet that cannot be too far away. And it's as if nature is looking at mankind now and saying, oh, human beings, you will make a decision. You know, and it will be kind of how the human mind will become divorced. It will be the child of the divorce of nature and technology. And whichever parent takes ownership, the child's destiny gets dictated by what it gets most exposed to. And of course, nowadays with the internet appearing, I'm telling you, any parent can expect their child to be exposed to content that will make their child seem strange. Because what is strange is the difference in the variations of the visions that we see. The values of our lives is in how our attention has put the life there. So if you say, Mr. Within, you who are speaking right now, what is the value of your life? I would look in the mirror and say, before any stories, truth was standing here. That is my stance. Before the concept of birth was born into my attention, there was a moment where matter belonged to the earth. Childhood is a very rare state. You know, sometimes there was this video of like this child in India, this left alone kind of baby in India, and there were 3 cobras that came to guard the baby. And I found that fascinating. There's videos. There was this video of this kind of chaotic video that was on YouTube where it showed this girl in certain cultures. Of course, the Western mind has to study the uncommon to discover difference in cultural programs around the world. For me, every time I see a person from another culture, I don't just see the person from another culture. I see a person who I wonder how much they ever paid attention to their upbringing. That means you were raised from the dirt into man, and how much do you remember who you are? It's an abidance with the moment. Because life is, the thing is, truth, guys, is alive. That means right now, imagine you're alone. And you may think you're alone, but what if I told you there is an intelligence that is present? That means, what if the planet was alive right now and every human suddenly became planetary conscious? We looked at Earth and we no longer saw it as failure. Because the way civilization is thinking now, people don't want to get into the savageness of nature, yet realizing that we have to keep a biological balance. So that missing puzzle piece to every moment is hearing and acknowledging the presence of truth. Now, when I say the presence of truth, this is not an ideological truth, because that is not the presence, that's the personality. The presence is raw attention. It's like when a really young child laughs, like very young child. I remember, like, believe it or not, I'm Persian, and in Persian households, like, the families are really close. And I remember my kind of like, how can I tell you, my grandpa saying something to my young cousin and seeing laughter in his face, when he was really young. And so it was as if that laughter had nothing to do with the concept. So that means people should wonder why children laugh when they haven't learned language yet. That's the mystery. And it is because this is what is not, I don't think it's taught, but the child's mind has an emotional intelligence. Did you know? So your emotions arise based on how much you deviate and move away from your true nature. And what that means is you are an extension of the natural world. It's as if, just like how humanity sends out a satellite, into another universe, people in NASA and headquarters are like, okay, let's monitor this satellite. Let's see where it goes. And so similarly, the human creature through evolution is kind of like the collective nature sending out a human form, sending out a creature separate to itself. Because the issue is, language wasn't, it's like in religion it says the word was first. But in regards to what we see, in regards to an evidence-based reality, is that no, matter was first. So the whole point of a person's intellect comes down to whether they think they are a thought or not. And ask yourself, if right now you think you're a thought, you think who you're thinking right now is a thought, so you tell me, does it make sense that a thought thinks it's a thought? A thought is a projection of the biological mechanism, even if we had to be pulled towards a secular mindset of consideration. So it's as if you're saying nature was here first, then every idea we had on nature. So that kind of blankness, that kind of uninterpreted reality before language was invented, was a sort of pure evolutionary state of attention. So the value of your life has to do with how much your intelligence, I can't put a verb to it, but how much this intelligence is aware that it's here. You cannot save the world if you don't see the world, because then you're saving your own world, which fundamentally means, inevitably means, you have been selfish from the beginning. You cannot, this is what happens. Guys, let me tell you what happens. People translate experiences into words. This is why I'm like speaking on this podcast thing as Mr.Within. Because I'm telling you, this whole thing of ideology or honest experiences mutating into conceptual tanks of belief, I'm telling you, there's wars of language going on too. You got to be aware of the external weather and the internal weather. The internal weather is how you are relating and responding to every phenomenon that happens to you. The reality and the presence of attention to value. That means it's kind of like I'm just reverse engineering it, guys. I'm saying, okay, we think a thought is here, where is the thought coming from? We see matter. We wonder, okay, there's matter here, where's the matter coming from? We suddenly think it's coming from the mind, because the light of visual sensory perception enters our eyes. It's like, why is light entering our eyes? Why are there tiny windows such as the pupil existing in biological design? It's like we don't realize it, but the gift of the gods to man, if when it was like this idea came that it was like man was made in the reflection of God, or Plato said, "As above, so below." When we wonder about this idea, let me tell you how I feel that happened. It was like God is giving a clue to what the ultimate spectrum looks like by presenting a human design. And this is such a unique philosophical landscape that I wish I hope that philosophers in the future come and try to scope this landscape of thought and try to conclude it somehow. It has to do with the transition of an individual conscious objective being into a collective unconscious subjective presence. Pretty much you gotta polish the mirror, and language and thought and every ideology you have. If I ask you what your stress is pretty much anybody who's stressed or depressed, what that means is you're just experiencing moments where your mind is going against itself. That's pretty much it. Anytime you dishonor yourself, you will be in a weird vibe of stress or depression. Anytime you feel you there was a potential of efficiency but it was not granted, so you feel like you don't want to be a part of a world that didn't accept your intention. We got to consider it, most children are raised in the warm embrace of their guardians. I find we are evolving beyond thought as an attributeless presence of attention, realizing it is its own maker. Let me tell you a personal story, because nowadays it was like I saw these, like, I don't remember the numbers, but these like kind of strange statistics on so many people all around the world being stressed and depressed, and I was like, okay, the whole statistic thing, like, let me tell you, we started as savage animals and now we are here. What that means is, imagine your depression. It couldn't have been as bad as your ancestors having to fight savage beasts to continue for your DNA to come this far. Okay? So I don't know how to say it, but it's like the fact that in the Abrahamic perspective, man fell from heaven. It was as if that was God's last kind of press of his hand on the clay that he made man. It's like the last update, the last gift God gave man was its individual existence, which had to sin, and sin represents separation. I'm telling you, sin represents duality. These are vast, these are major metaphors that were taken and personalized by the abstraction of man for certain intentions. What it is I personally find when you look at ancient mythology or various stories, sometimes, most people who look at these stories are like, okay, what were they trying to communicate with these stories? What was the poet attempting to share to the vision of man? And what he was attempting to do was that the poet was having an emotional response to the moment, and this emotional response activated or manifested as the relationships that were accessible to that writer at the moment. So what it is trying to sculpt the emotion of the moment into story form. That means, like, you see, some people are like by nature painters, as if they have held the brush before they were born. And so these people who paint, it's as if they are expressing an emotion. Oftentimes I personally draw sometimes, and when I draw, it's kind of like a shamanic moment for me. It's a moment where I have no thought. I am just going in accordance with the trust of design. It's as if there's an emotional scan of the action that is much quicker than the thought justifying how the thought should arise. And the emotions are best wielded by the witness within, the attributeless witness, this observer that has been kept alive in mystical thought. So what it is a complex system of geometry. Pretty much everybody who, whatever you know, it's like you're just this unique geometrical shape. I find that on some level, it's probable that if we are able to see a tree and say, okay, on some level on paper, visualize how it has atoms and whatnot in it, like it's just a complex set of atoms kept together, particles kept together. You see, just like how we have given the mind the permission from just seeing the tree, the first reality, and then allowing itself to see a second reality, which is the atomic kind of existence of the tree, the same permission is there to see it in any other mode. So what that means is all inventors are given the same freedom. Because the inventor's ego is divine. Because the inventor's ego is not fighting the world outside, it's fighting the world inside. But the moment your ego fights the world outside, that's when you have become possessed by a power that is pretty much like a king who, the moment he, by force took the kingdom, when he put the crown on his head, the crown turned to paper. In other words, the truth could not be activated because there was insincerity, therefore suggesting a moving astray of the personality. So what I mean by that is that imagine who you are and everything that is part of your memory and everything that is part of your imagination. You have to simplify yourself from parallel ideological perspectives, because in every moment, every memory you hold it because you were a self in that moment, because there was a sort of ego alive. And when you look at the ego is kind of the mind's natural way to allow itself to expand into structures of memory. Because what the ego fundamentally is the idea of self. So the value of life is arising from the idea of self, but the idea of self is codependent with the separation as considered as the idea of the world. So what I'm saying is the person who from earth is trying to get to heaven is realizing he can only get to heaven if there is always a hell. So it's as if heaven never exists as long as hell exists, or hell exists in heaven. Do you see what I mean? There is a paradoxical situation that occurs. So this is why I consider sacred scripture or ancient books as a rare artwork that must be studied peacefully, not enforced as a political thought, but studied peacefully, because man's behavior has levels. You have to be conscious of what you're responding to, or you have no idea what the resistance is. So what that means is, imagine somebody pushes you externally. Okay, somebody just slightly pushes you and you're like, whoa, you get pushed. So now imagine in life, as you witness various ideological systems, the way you have considered your sense of self, which is a sort of ideological system, is getting pushed. So this is why we have people getting angry at sounds and words. Okay, because of the reality they're keeping in place, because there's a model of communication where it is terminal oriented, where it is station oriented, where there is the first point and the second point, and there is a sort of kind of oscillation back and forth to keep a sort of world alive. But at a further, more closer glance, it's kind of like how recently I was in a TED talk. I don't know who the person was saying it, but in the TED talk, it was interesting because the analogy that they shared, and I'm pretty sure the analogy wasn't from the TED talk. It was much more ancient, but I think it's Vedic. It's a Vedic analogy, because they had a lot of ideas that it's as if clay could take different shapes, but fundamentally the essence is clay. Okay, so what that means is the all objective movement echoes into your mind as your subjective grasp of it, which is limited to your experiences. There was something known as the School of Athens back in the day. The School of Athens was a place where the visionaries of the world gathered. They were not there to uh, fight or compete or find peace. They were just there to gather to see what the result of the visions were, to see if there was an ultimate opportunity, something that every human being could do that could ultimately contribute to the evolution of the civilization. What would that be? And so we see pretty much it's the reemergence of a more responsible personality. So for the next 50 years, all self-help books are going to be discipline and organization and maintenance oriented. It's as if people are getting tired of the of the marketplace of ideology. They're like, what is this? I go to this part of the world, they're saying the world looks like this. I go to that part of the world, they're saying the world looks like that. And it's like, what is this game we're playing? Are we all trying to paint truth a new face every moment? Or we have to, in some sense, resolve that there is more than thought, so we relax. This is where I say it's the ultimate test of mastery. You know what the test of mastery is? You know who becomes a master? The person who is so skilled that even though he knows he can deliver the killer blow, he does not. He lets the rage internally defeat his opponent. And this is the biggest sentence that I think is going to inspire incredible compassion. Literally, the Dalai Lama might like hear this Mr. Within talk and be like, okay, nice. This is like good compassion campaign, you know? So let me tell you what it is. we must consider that there are dimensions that are unknown. And I don't know how to tell you, but the unknown, it only opens up through trust. And you will only trust it when you don't fear something. Whenever there's desire and fear, don't think about morality too much. A society where there's so much desire and fear everywhere, you can't be moral. I'm serious. And it doesn't mean you shouldn't abide by law, but it means that you must find a new solution. And what it is in every moment, especially for the human being, all human problems can be solved in two ways. Either you look at yourself, or you look at everything else that self is considering is not it. You either change the world of that self, or you change the self of that world. Either the world remains as fixed value, your sense of self shifts, either your sense of self shifts and in some sense the world remains the same. And then again, the pilot of consciousness navigates the attention. So it's as if the difference between the advanced communicator and the pilot of consciousness is that both have opened their eyes in an era of ideal worship and are realizing that it is the next great responsibility which evolution is choosing to be a mind. It's not the fact that we should care about are we a mind or not. It is that there is something going on here as our intelligence, as human beings. And so we have to abide by it. And therefore I just hope I get to see the dawn of the great conversationalists. It's going to be a moment in our history where human beings are going to be like, holy shit, we all live once. What are we doing? Everybody trying to be cruel or competitive. I mean, it's understandable for progress's sake, but on some level we have to care for the journey of the human experience. It's as if we declare war on war by denying the existence of the concept, by removing the concept of hatred from love. That is some like next level thing, but I think it's not going to happen for the next 100 years or so. Because trust me, ideas are like have architecture too, just like how, for example, there's the wisdom of Socrates that remains through his sentence, like his quotes online. Similarly, it's like the pyramids of Giza have remained from ancient Egyptian culture. So from Socrates' mind, the architecture of his language has remained. And so on some level, it's like every time you speak, you're building a city. You're building a city in the void of a subtler dimension. And it gets animated in regards to how much it comes to life. How much you look at life and you choose for it to be external. I'll be honest, right now I'm in a moment where it's strange. It's as if certain days I wake up and I feel it's as if it doesn't matter if I am awake or asleep. It's as if the game is like for how long can one run in the hamster wheel of visibility, invisibility, known, unknown. Eventually the witness arrives. When the witness arrives, the presence realizes the mind has realized its void. So imagine it didn't matter how much fear or desire you had. At the end of confronting that fear and desire, you saw a void. It's like they asked what's greater than greatness, and greatness was like that which was here before me, and they realized there was nothing there. It was the origin of man's mind. We are all artists because we all do things that have never been done before because our DNA has never existed. There's a value to our contribution if we choose. If we as a species, global communities emerge and it becomes a global rebellion, that means many human beings are waking up in parts of the world and they're like, we must have a more efficient journey. Rather than thinking of overpopulation, we must think we are tourists in a material dimension. And so we want to help the experience of the tourist. We want to help the experience of a mind that has dared to be free in a world that is showing it is enslaved. It's as if they put the lion in the cage, but the lion roared in a way where the cage never. It was as if the cage never existed, as if the denial of the past and the denial of the future was always the present moment. How much do we care for life? Does it matter? For me, there was a time where what can one do when they reach the edge of failure? They reach the denial of their mind, the dismissal of the value that is in their personal dimensions. Because society and civilization is at a point right now where it cannot see the citizen. The political system is too behind. That means the citizen is always seeing much further than the political system's actions can catch up to. Therefore, it means that we will never have proper politics. That means forever people will complain about the political system. It's hilarious. But the thing is that the whole structure should change because people are trying to remain traditional, and it's the situation where if we stick way too much to the roots of the past, we will never discover the edges of the branches of the tree. And at the same time, if we go too far into the edges of the branches of the tree, we may forget our roots. So what it is there has to be a singular intersection. That means if there could be, or there will be potentially, one common human allegiance. Imagine the children of our children's children are living in a world where there is a sort of incredible responsibility for the creative ability of human beings. So it's as if people have just articulated that it's common sense that people in this world deserve freedom, because freedom allows their genius to arise. Their genius is the permission of a world that could use the innovation. That means the secret will not be told until it can be received. Jonathan Swift has this quote where he says, "Vision is the art of seeing that which is invisible to others." And Henry David Thoreau, he says, "It's not what you're looking at that matters, it's what you see." So in some sense, it's very crucial to wonder about how sight is translating itself into value, meaning, the self of the moment and whatnot. When you get comfortable with this observance, when the presence of the moment arrives, pretty much the most enlightening thing that can happen to someone is for the horizon of their intentions to expand. That means really you don't need help in this life. You need to just see what you have not seen yet. You know, you need to just zoom in more on the what life means to you, and purpose originates through creative endeavor. Because it's like the coolest thing one can do in a world of lies, to just, just realize one lifetime. It's like, who has the time to forget who they are, It's a call to action, but more like a call to the presence of clarity. It's kind of fascinating being an evolutionary creature, is it not? That we attain consciousness, yet there are great mysteries. And me and you are literally in a universe where we say it's the observable because there's some parts of it that cannot be observed. If it was 100% observable, we never needed the word observable. So the unobservable universe means the laws of what is seen cannot travel into the unseen, so we cannot articulate or expect it. And I want you to understand that nature has designed human beings in a way where the only thoughts that are only required remain. Just like your body filters food that you eat, your mind filters ideology in accordance to how much you're abiding with who you are, or how much you're enforcing an unauthentic self in a world that your eyes, in some sense, never wanted to walk in. So it's like every step is a contribution. I was in a place, I believe it was Cislago, Italy, in a hotel. And I was going through a very strange phase of my life where I don't know. I think I was confronting existential chaos, you know? I was pretty much behind my eyes. I felt like the purpose in life had fainted. It not fainted, but like not faded, but like the purpose of life was no longer just how I thought about things. Do you see? Do you see that it was a very strange moment? And so I had this situation where, of course, this is of course a story for the more shadowy aspects of my character, but pretty much I had a dark night of the soul, and this hotel had 3 floors, and it didn't have a balcony, but it had this kind of giant window that opened, and there was enough space for someone to go sit there and have a cigarette. So I'm there sitting there having the cigarette. This is a couple years ago. And as I'm having the cigarette, I am bashing myself behind my eyes. I am literally as if being the worst bully of my own morality, of my own, not morality, my own value. In that moment, I felt like I was reducing myself. Every moment, the conscience, the hope or intuition, the voice, the inner guiding voice came. It's as if, like the man, like to be poetic about it, it's as if not taking your headphones off when your guardian angels are speaking to you, for example, in ancient traditional, context, if you were to see it. It's like a ridiculous metaphor, but man can't be perfect if his language isn't. It's fascinating. We see the planets are hovering in some sort of empty space, but we cannot see that all our thoughts on who we are we can't see how they are also hovering in empty space. And what the internal and external reality share that unifies them is the same emptiness factor. That means it doesn't matter what happens. There is a shift from shift of existential design, that whether the experiencer likes it or not, as long as it is in the program of the existence, will experience. Pretty much, Mr. Within is saying that if you want to evolve, you have to create new relationships with the self. And the self is not something that is one thing. You're never just one image of, you're never a thought, like you're not a snapshot photo. You're more like a navigator of attention in a movie. Our intelligence is more dynamic, and we get bogged down in beliefs of our ancestors without realizing that the moment that we are alive, we're meant to create the waves of the next renaissances of the future. It is crucial. Your inner reality, your honesty is the best microphone to find. I'm telling you. So many things open up because in an honest moment, you trust the moment naturally, you know? And in Zen, they say climb the mountain by, starting at the top. What that means is let your mind be in heaven even though your body is moving in on earth. Have your mind be at peace even though your body experiences the chaos of suffering. The ancient sages spoke of the wisdom of love. And this love was not a love between man and the other, but a man and the world. And the world was the mind, and the mind was the moment. And truth was here before you needed to find it. That is Satchit Ananda. This consciousness that is trying to exist in a certain way realizes the presence of its existence is bliss on its own. It is the opportunity of a lifetime to have a lifetime. to be able to live a lifetime, you know? Every moment of the opportunity of a lifetime is the opportunity of a lifetime, you know? And so, if you think you're a thought, the unknown will be empty. But if you see beyond the thought, the unknown is yet to be seen. There's terra incognita behind our eyes. There are uncharted forests of various ways that, in some sense, language can become wild again. You know, I find civilization will be efficient when it gets to a point where every human being is leaving libraries behind. And these libraries entail how their experiences led them towards contributing to civilization. Because I know a lot of people are experiencing moments that they feel it is just personal. And sure, everything in life is personal. The personal dimension never goes away, but it is the value that the personal provides for the impersonal. So it's like we have to become realistic about a civilization's efficiency. Therefore, we have to become realistic about the contribution of the individual to the civilization. And so we see that if we choose to give it a story, it becomes a battle of war. So the Rubik's Cube, kind of like the next level puzzle to solve, is how do we come up with one global language and narrative that doesn't cause war? How do we find a vision among all human beings that all human beings look at and they're like, okay, that's worth living for, you know? Because the honor, because people are being violent because they feel they're not being seen. Isn't that strange, guys? But let me tell you, we are not just biological machines, and it's not that we can always fly beyond the skies of our animalistic instinct. It's just that if you are destroying something that it took a long time to get here, you haven't understood where you are. This is the world of the transcendental builders. We are moving into an era of the mind's next great dance. That means we are reaching the end of the physical evolution. And what that means, and the end of the physical evolution is the beginning of the collective being. So right now, we are experiencing consciousness as one unique consciousness in one body for one person. Okay? But I'm saying if in the future there were these booths and imagine groups of people connected their brains to this one computer or technological thing, and so it would be one of those situations where suddenly, no, one moment is 5 moments. You see, there's an integrative factor that automatically is such an addition of waves of data that it becomes transcendental on its own. That means the value of the number is in who is requiring the number. And the value of your thoughts is who is requiring your thoughts. So when I was in Ceslago, Italy, on the third floor of this hotel, I'm having this cigarette, this dark night of the soul, constantly, as if every failure I had experienced in my life was like visiting me in that moment, and it was bashing me. It was as if I was being the idea of my ego in that moment was being bashed by, the failures of my past, the voices of my past that I hadn't heard. And so in that moment, something incredibly fascinating happened. as I was stressed, and because I was on the, I went outside by the window. My feet were like inches away from the edge of the building, and I had this idea of like, okay, imagine if I do make a mistake. What is the consequence? And then I realized it is, if there is nothing, that would be boring, and if it not that would be in some sense meaningless, and if there was something, it would still be a game, it would still be a projection of manifestation. And so the personality on an internal level, there was this kind of self-loathing kind of dialogue in that moment. But let me tell you what happened in the middle of it. This kind of, so in my mind, imagine I'm sitting on that edge having the cigarette, having these kind of like negative thoughts, and in that moment I noticed that one of the self-talk, all these sentences from past senses of myself, that past memories of myself that I was hearing, or viewpoints of the past that were visiting me, I noticed one sentence repeat. And I got bored, and I realized I had kept my attention on a sort of internal structure that had caused me to loop. So this is what consciousness means. How free you are before you need it to be. That's the greatest teaching, I think. For if we say everything is in a universe, in some sense, the subjective reality also arose from one verse, which is the self of selves, the first concept that the mind became. And once that concept is confronted, it's as if like a writer can always flip the page, and that's the value of liberation. That's when novelty becomes your spirit guide. That's when efficiency is worth trying for, and to see what happens, Our ancestors, if they were watching, imagine whether we were samurai or whether we were kind of Native American, shamanic cultures or whatever, like whoever we were, if our ancestors were watching us, it's like what they would like to see is authentic effort, because the biggest regret in people's lives are the moments where they saw a greater value, a version of the moment happening, and they couldn't in some sense apply. So there's this complex relationship going with the internal dimension, external dimension. And I find if we incorporate in our cultural and psychological understanding that there's an inner life and an outer life, then it'll be much more easier. Levels will open up in explaining human psychology. What that means is when two people, for example, I'll give you an example. For example, when two people break up, before psychologically we'd say, okay, their psyches were structured differently, and so they left. Okay, but the way I'm saying it is like two people broke up because their inner realities, their inner lives, could not agree upon the same external. Their attention did not want to be around one another. This is why the only marriages that work are the marriages that the beings care to be in the same moment. Their attention cares to be on one another for some reason, whatever that reason is. Call it love, but it's like there is something that is an attractive force to the moment. You see. And pretty much, guys, in the middle of that self-loathing and self-talk, just to continue the story and finish it off, I got bored. I got bored of how my mind was generating value from language emotionally. And when I got bored from it, the emotion vanished instantly. And I realized how hilarious how so much of our emotional lives are based on how certain thoughts are projected in our attention and our attention is stuck on it. And it's not that like you can get your attention off a thought. The whole thing is to just, you got to become real with yourself for a moment. And then there comes this wave of alertness which orients the physical structure to its environment. And so it's like, how can I tell you? Once your mind is ready, don't worry about physical, what happens in physical reality. It's like, you know, you have become the sky before needing to fly into it or fly in it, you know. Anyways, guys, I hope this talk has served you. Recently, I've decided to recommend certain things before I end off. One thing I want to recommend to listeners is that begin writing, and begin writing only when an idea is important enough to write down. And you'll realize it when if you are someone who truly is having an experience, you will, like creative people are people who like their, if the brain was an antenna, their antenna's picking up something like uncommon. And so in today's economical kind of social structure, we don't know how to incorporate creativity, as if like these sorts of ancient engines are keeping civilization traditionally alive, but from this tradition there's always counter cultures that are trying to move away. So what that means is certain children are opening their eyes and they're liking what they're seeing, and certain children are opening their eyes and they're not liking what they're seeing, and based on that they choose whether they want to be selfish or not, you know. And so a lot of people selfish in this world. And that's what selfishness is. You're seeking to take. Anytime you have a taking mentality from life, strangely things will be taken from you. Anytime you have a giving mentality in life, strangely things will be given to you. And you'll kind of look at the world and be like, hey, God is here, but he's playing dice, you know. And Albert Einstein would be like, yeah, you know, he'd give you props. I don't know what it is. It's just, it's living art, kind of like how the poet Rumi said, "Be living poetry." That's like an incredible statement. Be living poetry means let your, not just a sentence and on a paper project a certain moment of beauty. Let every action be your greatest action. So it's like the only way to not make a mistake in life is if in every moment, based on your conscious ability and direct attention, you choose to just, how can I tell you? First figure out what you are, then let the world, then take the judgments of the world into consideration. And that's a test of true intelligence. Because the world is just, I'm telling you, ideological worship, ideological possession, it's all happening. The exposure of language to the mind of the human being does to some degree redefine it, kind of like a satellite entering a new planet and the people on that planet being like, whoa, what is this? You know? Anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. Much blessings and namaste.